and you cannot look me in my eyes so sincerely and deeply, like, look at me, look at me, look at me. Tell me right now that that wasn't one final F you to Taylor. Hey guys, it's Briar of Briar Chats, and this is a safe space for yappers. Now, I really didn't know what to expect when I sat down to watch Taylor Swift versus Scooter Braun Bad Blood. And to be honest, if I wasn't going to make a video about it, I probably wouldn't have watched it. But I did, and I wanted to yap to you guys about it because I came away from it just feeling like I feel like this documentary had a lot of problems, and it all kind of came down to this premise and the hypothesis that they started out with, that being whose side are you on and who is right and wrong. So if you simply wanted to yap about this two-part documentary and everything that I kind of felt like was wrong with it, or help people on either side see the other's perspective, stick around and let's get into it. Obviously, it is no surprise that I am a Swiftie, but I really did want to try my bestest to go into this docuseries with an open mind and to kind of see Scooter's perspective, or to kind of, I guess, learn things that maybe I didn't already know about the situation. But unfortunately, I came away from the series just feeling like what was added to the narrative was only division. It wasn't about having people hear other people's side, but trying to find out who was right and wrong, and really trying to come up with that ultimate answer, because that is how the docuseries starts. It sets the stage by saying like who is right and who is wrong, Taylor's version versus Scooter's version. And I feel like whilst yes, I understand you're trying to show both people's side, I feel like this ultimate premise is part of the bigger problem and why it's not creating the most productive dialogue that it could have. So I'm simply going to chat you guys through what is told to us through this docuseries, but obviously with my opinions throughout. I am in no slay, absolutely nay, trying to say that this is a unbiased opinion, but I really did try to write down the facts and, you know, critique both sides and be open to both sides. I tried my best. Okay, we start off with episode 1 is Taylor's version. We have a lot of B-roll around the Eras tour, talking about how she was the first artist to become a millionaire off solely music. We have a lot of other artists and celebrities that have branched out into other areas, I guess, that have become millionaires. But for Taylor, she has proven that you literally can become a millionaire off of music and your musical career. This storytelling does go back and forth in time, and it does it both in each version episode, so it is kind of a bit back and forth, giving info, going back. The story really starts with the crux of the situation. Scott Borchetta selling Big Machine to Scooter Braun, and therefore selling Taylor's masters to him as well. And this is also where we get introduced to this who is right and who is wrong hypothesis. I find it really interesting that they chose to be so explicit with this goal of this docuseries, because to me, if you're trying to just research and look into something, you shouldn't be going into it with, I should find this answer. And I think that is, to me, one of the problems in the way that this narrative is told, is that it's about finding this ultimate right and ultimate wrong side, instead of being like, these are the two perspectives, but this is where you could understand where each person is coming from. So after we're introduced to the hypothesis, we go to December 2019, where Taylor is at the Awards for Women in Music and gets an award for being like the Woman of the Decade, and uses this speech to talk about the fact that she was not able to buy her masters, and she's basically not going to be bought willingly and have this happen to her behind her back.
After I was denied the chance to purchase my music outright, my entire catalog was sold to Scooter Braun's Ithaca Holdings in a deal that I'm told was funded by the Soros family, 23 Capital, and the Carlyle Group. Yet, to this day, none of these investors have ever bothered to contact me or my team directly to perform their due diligence on their investment in me.
Now, to understand why this is such a problem, the documentary goes back to 2009 at the infamous MTV Awards where Kanye does his "I'ma let you finish" speech. Now, like I said, this is in 2009, so Taylor is 19 years old and totally had her moment taken away by a fully grown man who is a lot more established in the industry. And this moment does come back up throughout this docuseries. On Taylor's version, they talk about how she tries to make a joke about it. She goes on SNL the next week, kind of makes light of the situation, and is able to kind of move on from it. We then talk about Taylor's growth in her career and how she was someone that was able to transition so seamlessly from being a teenage musician to an adult musician. They don't really talk about it, but to me, one of the reasons that is because unlike, the Disney stars that we had at the time, Taylor wasn't tied to a childlike entity. Taylor was just someone that was growing up and sharing that through their music, so it was very natural. With each album, she grew up a little bit more, and her audience also grew up with her. They also talk about the fact that she signed a 6-album deal with Big Machines in 2005. She was really one of the initial artists to sign with Scott Borchetta and Big Machines. Lest we forget, 2005 means that she was 15 years old. I know that she is born in 1989, but she is born at the end of that year. Now, I will say I had varied opinions on the experts that were brought on, but one expert that I truly appreciated was the Swiftologist. Now, if you don't know, the Swiftologist is a YouTuber that does a lot of Taylor Swift content, and he is incredibly well versed. The level of knowledge that he has is unmatched. And so when he came on my little screen, I kind of scrumped a little bit because I was like, okay, I appreciate this. They've obviously tried to bring in people that understand Taylor and her career, but I do think it's quite interesting to note that her experts were her fans and friends, as well as people that she used to work with. And I feel like one of the big reasons that the Swiftologist and another expert was brought on was because her relationship with her fans is a big part of the story. It's talking about how she was able to create that really intense relationship and was able to relate to her audience on an individual level with each song. We then talk about how it is most likely assumed that Taylor would have met Scooter, and that is obviously through Justin Bieber. We'll get into this a little bit more in the Scooter side, but Scooter is actually the one who discovered Justin Bieber and became his talent manager. He was a talent manager for a lot of really massive artists in the 2010s, and he was a very front-facing figure. I find it quite interesting how in each version they kind of talk about the other person, and I'm like, I get it, you can't talk about one without the other, but it just felt a little bit strange, especially in Scooter's part. We'll talk about it more when we get to it, I guess, but I feel like Taylor's part was really about her and her career, whereas Scooter's part kind of got derailed a lot. Another expert that we meet for Taylor's side is one of her personal assistants that she had during the 1989 tour, and she talks about basically Taylor's character, about how she is who you think she is. She's genuine, she's sweet, she saw her write Are You Ready For It on a plane. She has all of these very genuine and nice stories about her, which whilst I feel like is nice, I think if you are on the Scooter side or you're not a fan of Taylor, these types of opinions and stories, those people really don't care about. We then talk about how Taylor was reduced to who she was dating a lot throughout her career, and how this happened a lot because of the songs she wrote, and how she was quite ruthlessly honest about the people that she dated. And just in general, the way that she was treated by, interviewers, by press. We talk about the 2013 case that she had against a radio DJ who groped her during a photo, and she actually won that case. She sued him for $1 of damages, which was a countersue to him suing her for millions because he lost his job for groping her. Shocking. Oh my gosh. Consequences of your actions. And I think the message of this here is that Taylor will fight back. Taylor is more than happy to fight back. To me, what is one of the most important parts of this story, and as to why Taylor would not want her masters to be sold to Scooter Braun, is the Kanye situation. Because Scooter was Kanye's talent manager, and he was specifically, the talent manager during the Snakegate Reputation era when everyone was canceling her. And when you think about who a talent manager is or what they do, to say that he had no part in that is just absolutely ridiculous. Like, you could not look me in the eye and tell me that, especially when they use evidence like the Justin Bieber Instagram post where him, Justin, Kanye, and Scooter are all on a FaceTime, and the caption is literally, "Taylor, where you at?" And this all came about because Taylor said she was upset about the lyric that Kanye put in his song Famous because of the footage that Kim leaked. It was the narrative that Taylor knew about this. So not only is she overreacting, but she is lying. They play the video, and to me, at least, it's very clear you can tell Taylor is incredibly uncomfortable on this phone call. And Kanye actually never tells her the other part of the lyric, which is, "I made that bitch famous." He only tells her the fact that the lyric where it says, "I think Taylor Swift might owe me sex." She never got the full context of the lyric. She never got told that she was going to have a naked wax figure in the music video. Sure, it's not like she didn't know anything about it, but to say that she got given the full context and she was happily agreeing on the phone is definitely very disingenuous on the situation, and especially now that we know that that was a edited clip. And that is why Kim cannot just call Taylor up and like squash the beef. And in Miss Americana, Taylor's documentary, this has proven that this is truly one of the worst things that happened to her. Like, she was cancelled beyond what anyone could have imagined. Everyone hated her. She was getting constantly attacked. Like, the internet hated her. She was hated. She went into hiding. She literally moved to another country because of the way that she was being treated and the way that everyone turned against her in that situation. After Reputation was released, which was her 6th album, Taylor wanted to renegotiate. And they do point out the fact that this is a contract that Taylor signed when she was 15 years old, and she wanted to own her masters. She, I think, felt very much like she needed to move on from Scott and Big Machine. The deal that it seems like she was struck was she could earn back her masters by making more music, which would then mean she would have to make 6 more albums with Big Machine to be able to fully own all 12 albums. Now, when we think about it now in 2024, she still hasn't even released 12 albums. She may have if she wasn't doing the re-records. At this point in time, we have 11 albums. And ultimately, Taylor decides to leave Big Machine, and I think she has to acknowledge that by leaving, she is definitely losing the ability to buy her masters, at least from Scott and Big Machine in that time. She moves to UMG, to Republic, where she now owns both her song and music rights as well as her masters rights. Then on the 30th of June 2019, so coming up 5 years, is when the masters and Big Machine were sold to Scooter. Now, I do think it's important to note that it's not like Scooter just bought Taylor's masters, but he bought Big Machine. So he would have bought a lot of people's music, but obviously along with that, he got to own Taylor's music. It is made very clear that Scott Borchetta knew the relationship that she had with Scooter, and I think before this point, it was very well accepted and known that Taylor and Scooter did not have a good relationship because of the Kanye situation, because of the people that he worked with, and those were the people that wanted her cancelled and wanted her gone. And equally, I think because he's owning her masters, but he's not working with her anymore. It would have been one thing if she still was working with Big Machine and then it got sold to Scooter. That would have been kind of crazy, to be honest. But the case is that, which I guess probably happens a lot in the music industry, is that she was under a different label. So she's not working with Scooter. He just gets to profit off of her old albums, all of the albums that she made up until that point. Taylor's reaction to this is that she had no idea. She did not know that Scooter was the person that was going to buy her masters, but also the fact that it was very personal to her because of the terrible relationship that they had, and it felt very personal to her. Then on the 22nd of August 2019, she announced that she would re-record as her contract allows her to do so. And I feel like this is one thing that I do want to put a pin in, because in the same way that people argue Scooter was legally allowed to buy her albums, I feel like it's very important to note that Taylor is legally allowed to re-record her albums. Now, obviously, this did not go down well for Scott or Scooter, and it turned into a situation where she was told that she was not allowed to perform her old songs, as they could be taken or used as a re-record before the date that she was allowed to. Once again, Taylor did not take this lightly, and this is, to me, an important point as well, is that she tells her fans to tell Scott and Scooter how they feel about this. And this is where hashtag I stand with Taylor came from. And I do think that whilst, yes, a lot of people were acting reasonably and talking just about the fact that she should be able to own her music, she should be able to perform her music, as we will get into in the Scooter version shortly, a lot of people took it way too far. And it is, in my opinion, never okay to do what some people said to Scooter when we get into that part. So then we get to the 27th of November 2019, where we have the infamous The Man performance at the AMAs with the jacket that has all of the different albums that Taylor had stolen, as well as all the little girls dancing with her who wearing those jackets as well. It is interesting to note that the reaction to this was not overwhelmingly positive. I think a lot of people thought that Taylor was making a really big deal out of the situation, and that her defending herself or wanting to reclaim her music was seen as, once again, like in her past, being overreactive, over emotional, and just as if she should have just accepted it and moved on. We then finish this episode with how we started it at that 2019 Women in Music speech, where she says she will not be bought willingly.
The fact is that private equity is what enabled this man to think, according to his own social media post, that he could buy me. But I'm obviously not going willingly.
And really just calling out the situation and saying, like, I'm not taking this willingly. I'm not taking it lying down. You thought that you could just buy me without asking me and having this terrible relationship with me. And I'm here to tell you that that will never happen. And then at the end of part 1, we have the update where Scooter sold her masters to Shamrock, which is owned by Disney. However, he still profits off these masters. Even though he sold them, he still maintains the ability to profit. And you cannot look me in my eyes so sincerely and deeply, like, look at me, look at me, look at me. Tell me right now that that wasn't one final F you to Taylor. Oh, you can't? No, didn't think so. And look, is he allowed to do that if that's a legal business deal? Of course. He can do what he wants. I can understand he would have been pretty peeved off and wanted to get one over her, but this ultimately means that Taylor now refuses to buy her masters back from Shamrock because of this clause and because of the fact that Scooter is still profiting off them. And then the final kind of point of the Taylor episode or version is that they kind of get into the ethics and the way that her fans feel like it's almost unethical to listen to a stolen version, as it's commonly referred to, and people would either only listen to it if it was on a CD or, you know, not streaming, where Scooter is able to still make money off of it. And that's the end of the Taylor's version. To me, I didn't really find any new information in her version. I mean, I get that as a Swiftie, I probably know more than the average person, but I also felt like watching it, whilst yes, I did appreciate some of the experts, I feel like if you were not a fan of Taylor, you wouldn't have found this a compelling argument. Like, it would have probably or just kind of confirmed what you knew and felt about Taylor. She will fight for things, you know, whether or not the people watching agree with it. And I just felt like nothing new was really added to the conversation. Now it is time for part 2, aka Scooter's version. Now, I'm not gonna lie, right off the bat, I was pretty disappointed with his version. I really wanted to have an understanding of where he was coming from, of what he thought when he bought the music, or like how he thought that that would go, like honestly, or even if it was just like an honest acknowledgement of like, this is the way music is, and you know, at the end of the day, it's not personal, it's business. I wanted more to be brought to the table, and I wanted to kind of at least have an understanding of him, his decision, something. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. We start off with ominous music and talking about Taylor's fan army. It's not a fandom, it's an army. And Scooter was attacked by this army. We then start to talk about Scooter, and another criticism I do have of his version is that I feel like a lot of his episode wasn't actually really about him. I don't know. We'll get into it as we go on, but I found it kind of weird. Like in the beginning, we learn about his childhood, his growing up, his grandparents being, you know, Holocaust survivors, you know, a lot of stuff about him in the same way that we learn about Taylor, but that doesn't continue throughout. We also learned that because of his upbringing, he wanted to help people, he wanted to support people, and that is why he has the management style that he does, which is like very like siblingy, personal, like a guidance, a kind of wise figure guiding people through their careers. From their perspective, Taylor is upset at a business deal. He is business buying Big Machine, and along with it is Taylor's masters. And from his perspective, it is said he would have let her buy her masters. However, to me, the thing that I think is proven in this documentary but isn't explicitly stated is that Scooter was able to just buy her masters, whereas Taylor wasn't. Like, Taylor was given these other options. From the information that was given, it seems like either she had to stay with Big Machine and like, yes, she could own her masters, but it was still under Big Machine, or like I said before, she had to earn her masters back, once again working for Big Machine further. So I understand that Big Machine doesn't just want to give her her masters, but it is interesting to me that Scooter was able to just outright buy them, but she wasn't. And so he is confused. Like, he's like, I don't understand. Why are you having feelings about me owning your stuff? Is it because I instigated a hate campaign against you? Interestingly, I assume that they believe that you're going to watch the Taylor episode and then the Scooter episode, but they don't talk about his perspective on the Kanye situation. Like, we only get the way that Taylor felt about it instead of being like, oh, like he wasn't actually a part of the Kanye situation. Like, he didn't actually not like it. Like, there was no his version of that. It was just like, now, another thing that I found quite disappointing about the Scooter experts was it felt like a lot of them just did not like Taylor. And the way that they talk about Taylor is not unbiased, I guess. I don't know. I was kind of disappointed in those experts and how they didn't really offer insight into Scooter, but instead it was just clear they didn't like Taylor. Because one of the experts said she got everything out of the contract that she would have wanted to, referring to her contract with Big Machine. But that is clearly untrue when she wanted her masters. Another big component to the Scooter argument is the legal side, and I find this really interesting because I don't think that, at least to me, I never thought that what happened to Taylor and her masters was illegal. I don't think that what happened to her wasn't legally done correctly or wasn't legally allowed to happen. I just think that there was a lot of personal bad relationships underpinning the situation that made it not just a business deal. But anyway, they talk about how her consent, Taylor's consent, wasn't required to sell her masters. And I don't think anyone ever thought that it was, but I think what Taylor kind of meant was, this is her work that this person is going to continue to own. So surely there will be some sort of relationship that has to continue between her and Scooter. And for her, she just doesn't see any way in which that could happen because of the existing relationship that they have, of the fact that he was a huge part of her cancellation of the worst part of her career. They do refer to an interview Scooter did a lot, where he talks about how he understands where she's coming from and understands how it would have felt, but for him it was about buying Big Machine, and it was never about, not allowing artists to own their masters, which I find interesting since he sold them to Shamrock but still is able to profit off them. So I think it's kind of interesting that he's like, oh yeah, I would have let her, but didn't, and put in a clause that would make it so that she ultimately would never want to buy them. They also talk about how Scott Swift, Taylor's dad, was a shareholder in Big Machine. I think that they try and make this seem more calculated than it really was. Like, he owned 3% as a shareholder. You're not getting asked what you think about the situation. Like, business decisions do not involve 3% shareholders. Like, I'm sorry, if I'm wrong, let me know in the comments down below. But I felt like they were adding a lot. They were inflating, like, that Scott would have known about this and that somehow, like, he was a part of it and he profited off of the sale too, which then leads into them being like, Taylor is so privileged and, like, she got so much over other people and now, like, it's actually her fault. To me, it was a very strange logic. And this is why I didn't particularly enjoy the experts on his side, because one of them was critiquing her 2019 Women in Music speech, saying that instead of being humble and thankful for getting the award, she made it about men and about other things. This then quickly led into this narrative of Taylor cannot keep friendships. And this is what I mean. Like, we are in the Scooter episode, yet we are talking about Taylor. I don't know. Like, I get that maybe this is to them the argument as to why boo tomato Taylor, but it was very odd. It was very much like they brought up the Bad Blood music video and how basically Taylor, saying that Taylor's the reason that Katy Perry's career went downhill, like that she was mean, like she's a mean girl. You're a mean girl. I want my pink shirt back. I feel like Taylor and her friends and everything that was happening was such a bigger, like, symptom of the situation. They were such a bigger part of the way that women were pitted against each other in 2014. Instead, it turned into like, Taylor's a mean girl. She can't keep friends, she's a bully, she wanted violence. Like, they took the music video so literally that she wanted violence against Katy Perry. It was very odd to me. The next thing that I personally couldn't understand was that they interpreted the Kanye phone call as Taylor is happily agreeing.
So can you brace yourself for a second?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Wait a second, you sound sad.
Well, is it gonna be mean?
No, I don't think it's mean.
Okay, then let me hear it.
Okay. It says, to all my South Side niggas that know me best, I feel like Taylor Swift might owe me sex.
That's not mean.
Okay.
On the phone, and Kanye's actually the one quaking in his boots. He is the one shivering in his timbers, a grown man scared of Taylor. Come on, like, be so for real. Like, I really wanted genuine criticisms. I genuinely wanted to understand his perspective, and I'm sitting here watching them be like, I don't really like Taylor. It's actually her fault that Kanye called her out. Like, she's actually so mean. She actually loved the lyrics. Like, it was so baffling to listen to. I think it also brings up a good point that Taylor has brought up against Scooter, where it's like,
is people saying, but he's always been nice to me, when I'm raising valid concerns about artists and their rights to own their music.
Just because he was nice to you, he was nice to other people, doesn't mean he's incapable of being unkind to her. And I think that is a really good point, and a point that they were not really able to refute or prove wrong, because they talk about the Ariana Grande Manchester situation, and I think, yes, that is such a good example of when he was an amazing talent manager for Ariana. He helped her put on that One Love show. I think if anyone was to sit here and say doesn't prove he's a good person. Like, no, of course, that's an amazing thing. Like, that is such a good example of him being a good talent manager, but I don't think that it means that he is incapable of also being a ruthless business owner that doesn't care about Taylor's feelings and would actually happily get one over someone that he doesn't like. The one thing that is also really interesting to me is they talk about how Taylor is devaluing their good faith deal. And I'm like, well, that's interesting, because before you were saying her consent is not required to sell her masters. So you acknowledge that she's not part of that deal. Then yet you also say that she is the one that is devaluing the deal by doing what she is legally allowed to do and re-record her music. Like, pick an argument. Like, that's the thing that I think as well frustrated me, is that there was a lot of like kind of hypocritical, I guess. It felt like arguments were used in his defense, but also he had behaved in a similar way against her. Now, this next part I do think is incredibly valid, and that is talking about how when Taylor asked her fans to tell Scooter and Scott how they felt, this escalated beyond what was appropriate. People were sending death threats to him and his family and his children. And I think any Swiftie that, or any fan of anyone that is okay with that type of behavior, that is just truly bizarre. Like, I think it is not something that is unique to Swifties, but I do think that it is like that crazy mob mentality where it goes way too far, where people completely lose sight of the actual situation, and it's never okay. Like, it's never okay to send people death threats. It's never okay to threaten people's children, to dox them. Like, sorry, like, it's not appropriate. Even though Taylor is your favorite and she said, tell them how you feel, that doesn't mean you're entitled to like threatening people's lives. I do find it interesting that when Scooter talked out about it, he said that social media is not a place to air out your personal grievances, yet that is exactly what the Kanye and Snakegate situation was. It was Kanye and Kim and everyone's personal dislike for her aired out and like rallied to attack Taylor, to send her death threats. Not that I ever am saying an eye for an eye is appropriate, but it's just interesting that he cannot see how he also incited a situation like that towards Taylor. They then talk about how he really just didn't like being the villain. He had never had bad things talked about him before, and he struggled with that. And I was like, okay, like, is it or isn't it what happened? They then obviously talk about how he sold to Disney and basically said that Taylor was the one that didn't come to the table to buy her masters. And I think if you look at the deal that he made with Shamrock, I find it hard to believe he would have just let her buy them with no strings attached, no NDAs, but that is kind of what he insinuates from the situation. They do have like a few more legal people on his side, because I think that is their whole argument, is that Scooter was in his legal right to buy her masters and to buy Big Machine. They talk about how the fact that she was able to communicate to her fans to listen to her versions over his versions, over the stolen versions. And I do think that they maybe take the naming of the stolen versions too literally. I don't think most people think that they were literally stolen from her, but like it feels like they were stolen from her in the sense that she wasn't given the same deal to buy her masters and she was never able to buy them back. They kind of conclude it by saying Scooter was legally allowed to. He was legally within his right to buy Big Machine and to buy Taylor's masters. However, in the sense of public opinion, Taylor is the one that won. And again, I feel like they're just trying to push this hypothesis again of who's right and who's wrong, and how it's probably because this is how the music industry has been able to act for a really long time. I think people did just quietly have to accept that their masters were bought and sold and they had nothing that they could do, and it was often to people that they didn't like. I think that Scooter just genuinely believed that he would be able to buy her masters, get one over her, profit off of her success, whilst not having a good relationship with her, whilst having tried to cancel her with the Kim and Kanye situation. And I think both him and Scott just did not anticipate the fact that she was not going to take this lying down, and the fact fact that she was able to re-record her masters, she was going to do it. In the same way that they were legally allowed to buy and sell them, she was going to legally re-record all of her albums. And that was the 2-part documentary. Now, I feel like I kind of did touch on all my problems throughout, but in a final conclusion type of a discussion, I think to me the biggest problem I had was that hypothesis, was the fact that they were trying to prove who was right and who was wrong. And I think in doing that, they weren't able to get each of the sides to listen to the other to understand where they were coming from. I think they really failed Scooter on his side by talking about Taylor so much, by having it be so much about how those experts didn't like Taylor, and then the only other argument being he was legally allowed to. But then those people also being offended or upset or shocked that she was also going to do what she was legally allowed to, which was re-record. Which does lead me into the experts. Although like I said, the Swiftologist, I scrumped, screamed, giggled, hee and ha-ha'd when I saw him. It was just really, I feel like Scooter's side, like there wasn't anyone that kind of was able to provide that context in the same way that Taylor's side did. And I feel like a couple of the experts on his side really did him a disservice by bringing in their personal opinions to the situation and kind of letting it cloud their criticism of the situation. Instead of it being a critique of the situation or trying to add context of his opinion or of his perspective, it instead turned to she's a mean girl, she's a bitch. Turned into why we don't like Taylor. It to me showed like people that don't like Taylor, this is how they're going to feel about the situation, and you're not going to change their minds. I also really feel like this didn't add any new information to the story. I feel like everything that they showed was probably already public knowledge. You know, they showed some of the Big Machine posts, but those were all already public online. And so if you're not adding new information and you're trying to decide who is right and wrong, to me, the only kind of discourse you're left to have is this side versus this side. Like there's no common ground being found. There's no understanding of each other. If anything, it's just like reminding people on either side why they don't like the other. Kind of just bringing it up, but not adding new information or having a middle ground. It felt very much like you are on a side, you have to pick a side, you cannot understand the other person. Can't be a complicated, nuanced situation where it's human beings involved, where it's complicated relationships involved. So no one's going to be perfect in either situation. Like to me, one of the most damning things about some of the Scooter experts is that they were literally trying to figure out how to turn that initial Kanye I'ma let you finish situation into it was her fault, or it's like it's not Kanye's fault. Like I was like, this is such a stretch. Like the way that they talked about Kanye was such a stretch, and the way that they talked about her, it was just very clear that they didn't like her and they were never going to be understanding of her side. But equally, they weren't providing any relevant or insightful context to his side. But yeah, long story long, those are all the problems that I had with Taylor Swift versus Scooter Braun. Bad blood. I would love to know you guys' thoughts in the comments down below. I personally am a nuanced person. I don't think that there's an ultimate right or wrong. I think, yes, Scooter was legally allowed to buy Taylor's masters. But I do think that, you know, it would be disingenuous to say that he wasn't aware of the bad relationship. Wasn't aware of the bad relationship that he and Taylor had, and that it would not go down well. I think because no one has ever fought back in this way, him and Scott kind of never could have perceived how this could have gone, or the fact that she would actually re-record. And you know, I'm a Swiftie. I think Taylor's well within her right to re-record her albums. I think like in her team statement at the end, she was able to find success and get her power back through this shitty situation. But I don't think that like Taylor is infallible. I don't think that she never has done anything wrong. I think that the experts that criticized her had very bizarre points. I think, you know, to me, I totally understand why she would find it upsetting. I totally understand why she would want to re-record. I think that she's not devaluing their good faith deal because, like they said, They didn't need her consent to have that good faith deal. And you know, I guess my biggest criticism of her was the I stand with Taylor situation going too far. But I do think now that we kind of see further into the situation, like she is supportive of like Scooter's ex-wife. Like I don't think that she wanted any of that to happen, but I do think it is an unfortunate reality of the fans that they took it too far. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I would love to know. Love your perspectives, thoughts, opinions. Let me know them all. But yes, thank you guys so much for watching. If you stayed to the end, you are a real one. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to keep up with me between my uploads, I'm on TikTok and Instagram, and I will link my vlog channel down below. But don't you worry guys, because I'm not funny there either. Bye.